Today's podcast will be in two parts. In the first episode, we're going to talk about a strange death. This is not your typical death, if there even is such a thing. There is so much mystery about the last few days of this person's life. It is a case that is still talked about often. I will also have a special guest on today's show to discuss this with me that I'm very excited about. First, let's talk about Blair Adams. Robert Dennis Blair Adams was born in December of 1964 and had grown up in White Rock, but currently lived in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. At the time of this mystery, he was a single 31-year-old construction foreman. He had in the past struggled with drugs and alcohol, but his mother said that he was faithfully attending AA meetings and was very proud that he hadn't had a drink in 2 years. He seemed to be turning his life around. However, in the middle of June of 1996, Blair Adams had been acting very strangely. He had stopped going to the AA meetings. He had been leaving his job site unlocked. He then abruptly quit his job without picking up his final paycheck. He told his workers he didn't know if he could carry on here. They suggested that he see a doctor. He told his mother, Sandra Edwards, that someone had been spreading rumors about him. He told friends that someone was trying to kill him. Then on July 5th, 1996, he told his mother that something was bothering him. He then took a spur-of-the-moment trip to Courtenay, British Columbia, to visit his uncle, but he was not home. Blair Adams then almost completely emptied out his bank account and safe deposit box. His mother estimated that he had around $6,000 in Canadian money, several valuable gold coins, and German currency. On July 7, 1996, Blair got in his Chevy Chevette and drove to Victoria and tried to board a ferry that would take him to Seattle, Washington. He was turned away when he lied about having a criminal conviction. Some reports say that he would make at least 5 attempts to enter the United States, but was turned back. Customs would deny him each time and was suspicious because he was nervous, was carrying a large amount of cash, and had a past record involving assault and drug charges. After being denied entry on the ferry, he went to visit a friend in Vancouver and then a friend in Westminster. He then returned to Surrey to visit his mother. She said that her son spoke tearfully about quitting a job that he had been boasting about a week earlier. He seemed anxious and said that he didn't want to stay in the apartment. On Sunday, July 8, 1996, Blair packed his bags and left his mother's home. Blair would then go unaccounted for the next 3 days, but here is a timeline of what authorities have been able to piece together during that time. In the early morning hours of July 9th, Blair was discovered by Canadian Border Patrol officers attempting to cross the border on foot at the Pacific Highway border crossing. Officials observed scratches covering Blair's legs and hands. He also matched the description of a man implicated in an automobile theft, and the vehicle had been discovered abandoned near the Pacific Highway border crossing. He denied any involvement, and there was no evidence against him, so he was not detained. Blair Adams was finally able to enter the U.S. via a car that he rented from the Vancouver International Airport. He arrived in Seattle and purchased a round-trip ticket to Frankfurt, Germany. Blair had previously worked in Frankfurt for his stepfather's company and had dated a woman there, but she told authorities that she hadn't been in recent contact with him. For some reason, Blair then changed his mind and traded in his ticket for a one-way ticket to Washington, D.C. He chose to purchase a one-way ticket for $770, even though a round-trip ticket would have only cost $350. When he arrived in D.C., he rented a Toyota Camry at the Dulles Airport on the morning of July 10th. Later that morning, Blair Adams was involved in a minor car accident when he backed his car into another vehicle that caused minor damage. The driver of the car said that Blair seemed nice, but was in a hurry. Then on the evening of July 10th, he would arrive in Knox County, Tennessee. He stopped at the BP station on Strawberry Plains Pike and told the clerk that he was having difficulty with his car key and was unable to enter the vehicle. They then called in mechanic Gerald Sapp to assist him. He realized that Blair Adams was trying to start the Toyota Camry with a Nissan key, which had belonged to his first rental car that he had abandoned in Seattle. Sapp asked Blair to check his pockets because obviously he had the key, since he'd literally driven it to the station. But Blair refused. Sapp then arranged to have the car towed to a local repair shop until the morning when the car rental agency could get him another key. He then dropped Blair off at the Fairfield Inn Motel. Blair Adams booked a room, but it appears that he never even entered it. Blair Adams' strange behavior would continue once he arrived at the hotel. Strangely, closed-circuit television of the lobby would show Blair loitering at the hotel for about 40 minutes before purchasing a room with U.S. currency. When the clerk tried to give him his change back, he left the lobby and walked outside. In the span of an hour, it would show Blair leaving and returning to the hotel 5 times that night, but never even entering the room that he purchased. Then what happened during Blair Adams' strange U.S. trip would soon take an ominous turn. On 7:30 a.m. on July 11th, Blair Adams' body was found by construction workers reporting for work near Crossroad Boulevard in Knoxville. He was found partially nude in a pool of blood at the construction zone of a Country Inn and Suites hotel that was being built off Interstate 40 near Knoxville. The area he was found in was only half a mile from the hotel that he had booked a room in. He was only wearing a shirt, and it was ripped open. His jeans, tennis shoes, and socks were near the body. His jeans and socks were both turned inside out. Tufts of his hair had been ripped out. One of his shoes was said to be under his head like a pillow. Blair's personal effects were nearby, and they included several sets of keys, including the key to the rental car that he was convinced he had lost. In addition to that, Canadian, German, and U.S. currency totaling almost $4,000. There were also gold coins and gold bars found. The only luggage found was a duffel bag that contained maps, receipts, a plane ticket, and paperwork for 2 cars that he had rented. So Blair Adams' bizarre odyssey of the last few days had come to a tragic end. Blair's family and friends were heartbroken and shocked to hear about their loved one's death. They knew that he had been acting strange in the weeks before his death and had told several people that someone wanted to kill him, but they didn't know whether or not to take him seriously. They also had no idea why he would have traveled to Knoxville, Tennessee, which was over 2,600 miles from his home in Surrey. As far as his mother knew, he knew no one there and had never been to the area prior. On July 20th, 1996, Blair's family would lay him to rest at the Victory Memorial Park in Surrey. The police did not think that robbery was a motive because Blair had quite a bit of money and gold around him when he was found. Authorities weren't sure what Blair was beaten with, but they believe it was either a club or a crowbar. He had definitely fought back against his attacker. His hands were bloody with defensive wounds, and he had many cuts and bruises. Blair also had sustained a blow to the head from the weapon. It is reported that the only physical evidence was one strand of long hair that was gripped in his hand. They believe that Blair was sexually assaulted, but no DNA could be found. In the beating, Blair had suffered a blow to his stomach that ruptured and caused an abdominal perforation, and because of that he developed septic shock, so that was his official cause of death. A security guard at a nearby business reported that he heard a scream around 3:30 a.m. that morning, and he thought that it was a woman's voice. It was also said that preliminary reports say that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system. Reports said that Blair's rental car would be found later the same day, about 6 miles from the construction site where his body was found. That is a little confusing, as his rental car was towed to the garage the night prior, unless the location it was found in was the garage. 2 women would come forward and say that they saw Blair talking to a man at a Cracker Barrel, but the man was never identified. Police would speculate that Blair's murder could be linked to a sexual interaction that went awry. A truck stop filled with sex workers was nearby. Police also think that it is possible that Blair Adams wasn't traveling alone because there was a different name than on his car rental agreement. When the theory was brought up of Blair's murder possibly being related to a sex crime, his mother didn't have any specific details to add. However, she did tell the Vancouver Sun that Blair did have at least one romantic relationship with another man who was his roommate. She said that when the relationship ended, as far as she knew, he had returned to dating females. With this case growing colder by the minute, the television show Unsolved Mysteries would air a segment on Blair Adams' mysterious disappearance on April 18, 1997. Sandra Edwards was praying that the airing would shed some light on her son's tragic death. There was really no mention of the amount of tips the show brought in, but in the end it apparently did not lead to a resolution in the case. The Knoxville Police Department said in an interview in 2010 that they had never received a credible tip in Blair Adams' death. To this day, the murder of Blair Adams has never been solved. His case seemed to grow cold almost immediately. There have been no suspects ever mentioned by police and no avenues to investigate. As far as why he may have traveled in that direction, Blair's mother did say in an interview 20 years later that he had possibly traveled south to attend the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta that he had wanted to see. The games began just 8 days after his body was found. However, it appears that she never passed on that possible theory to the police. Sadly, Blair's mom, Sandra Edwards, died in 2020 without having any answers as to who did this to her son or why he took his unexplained and bizarre trip to the U.S. I am honored on my podcast to have a friend of mine that I've wanted to have on here for a long time. I was just struggling at the perfect case to talk about, but then I found 2. And that is my friend Ed Dentzel, who has the Unfound podcast. Welcome, Ed.
Hello, Heather. Yeah, you really wanted to burden me. Instead of 1, she said, no, I'm going to have you do 2, Ed. All right, Heather. We can do 2 cases. All right, if you say so. Yeah, it's great to be here. Pleasure to talk to you.
And you've always been so welcoming, so supportive of my blog and now my podcast. And you guys definitely need to check out his Unfound podcast. I actually go on there once a year to chat with him about a case that I've covered, and we always have a good time talking.
We do, because Heather always brings, I think she's brought some of the most unique disappearances. Dale Kerstetter, Kenneth Playstead, Ricky Jean Bryant, so many very unique ones. Thanks, I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And now these are pretty well-known cases, I thought. So I believe when you said you weren't familiar with them, I asked you what rock you'd been hiding under.
I hide under a lot of rocks, Heather. Down here in Clearwater Beach, if you don't know. You know what I think it is? I think it's just that I've become such a specialist in disappearances that it very well may be that I knew about Blair and Cindy, but given there's only so much room in my brain for true crime stuff, it very well could be that they were pushed to some, back corner because disappearance has now ruled my life. So
yeah, and I wanted to get some that were already resolved, so I didn't want them to be ones that you had covered. And also, bear in mind, I'm a hardcore Unsolved Mysteries fan, so those were on there, these 2 cases.
Yes, and I've watched those episodes. a few times now, and because I just recently turned 55, I took notes that are in front of me, because,
Yes.
I'm losing my mind now at 55.
I'm not far behind you, Ed. I have my notes here, too.
All right.
Okay, so
Very good.
So what were your thoughts after you heard about the case and watched the segment on Unsolved Mysteries about Blair?
This is I want to say this is very timely because I just read a recent article about mental health and the way Western civilization has treated people with mental health issues since going back to Greek times, like Plato and all that. So that was really on my mind as I was watching both of these and taking my notes. And with Blair, I came away wondering if there had been something going on with him, with his mental health, for a long time that just was getting progressively worse and worse and worse to the point where he couldn't hide it anymore. That's what I came away with. Maybe a good example, like a boat. Eventually there's that one drop of water that will eventually sink a boat. Even if it may take a while, it can take a lot of water until it sinks. Is this kind of the same thing that was going on with Blair in his life? That was something.
Yeah, that's a good point because, I think the biggest mystery in this case is how he died. I don't think it's a mystery. It doesn't make any sense, his trip, but, it definitely seems like mental illness was the main reason.
Yeah, and I also started wondering, it being, once again, perception is that it came on very fast. It very well may not be that way at all. Like I said, it might have been building for a long time. And you might have only encountered that with Blair if you'd have happened upon certain topics and talking to him. You might have seemed, perfectly sane and everything, but if you brought up something about some crazy X-Files episode, he might have said, oh, yeah, that's totally true. Oh, yeah, people do live inside the earth. Because that's sometimes how it goes with people who are starting to have mental health issues. But I also wondered, could it have been, I don't know if you know this or not, but was given an autopsy, was his brain checked? I was even thinking, did he have a brain tumor?
No, that's a good point. There was never any mention of that. I bet they probably didn't even think of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I never heard with the toxicology. I don't believe that they didn't mention there was anything in his system, because I know they said he had had past struggles with drugs, but he had been in recovery and was going to AA, but then he stopped before he started acting erratically.
Yes. Right. So those are some of the things I wondered about him just as a person. How long this had been coming on. And if it was something that was gradual or even very quick. We know there are many brain cancers that grow very fast. If they grow in certain parts of the mind, people can start to have mental health issues. It's just not them collapsing while going to the gym one day. Instead, it takes the form of they're performing all their duties just fine, but they think that there's aliens following them and stuff.
Yeah.
It takes different forms, a variety of forms.
And people have mentioned him possibly having paranoid schizophrenia, because he was convinced someone was out to kill him. And this case is unique because it's not often that you're convinced someone's trying to kill you, and they actually do. Someone does kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that probably is true. What are the odds? But I think on the other hand, we also have to understand that if you're out in the streets and maybe you're acting a little odd and everything else, I think the odds do go up. Maybe that you'll run into the wrong person.
Yeah,
I think that given the homelessness, for example, and I think here, at least in the United States, we greatly associate homelessness with mental health issues. That, my perception is homeless people are getting in fights all the time. It's like a jungle out there. There's no laws. there's no etiquette or anything. And so this is also something that occurs to me with Blair, that, he's walking around there. He seems like he's lost his mind. Who would he encounter during that?
Yeah.
Most likely somebody that, maybe, of course, didn't rip him off, but had ill intentions.
Yes, someone on Reddit posted, and they said that they worked with Blair when he worked in Germany, and he had kind of an aggressive side to his personality. So that made me wonder if that was a factor that night. He approached someone in his erratic, maybe aggressive behavior that didn't appreciate it. But it was almost like, it was such a severe attack, because at first, Unsolved Mysteries, I remember them saying a blow to the stomach. And I thought, well, a lot of things could have done that. But when I read a little bit more, it said there were several, he had several assaults, and they think it was a pipe or some kind of a, blunt instrument. But yet none of his money was taken.
Right, and it also, I read somewhere that it showed that he might have even been sexually assaulted.
Yeah,
it's not very explicit, at least what I've read, as far as what that meant. I think when it comes to women, we have a better idea of what that might mean. With men, it could be a variety of things. So there's that. And so, did he do that to himself? You wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
But people who are having mental health issues, I'm inclined to think that they're capable of anything.
Yeah, and
even attacking themselves, hurting themselves, all of that. So.
And Unsolved Mysteries, they showed the autopsy, and people have paused it, and they said that there was a mention on the autopsy of anal penetration. They did say that there was no DNA found. And I don't know whether this is a factor, but like his mother would say that, basically that Blair was bisexual as far as she knew. So, it could have been a consensual encounter that just something bad happened and it had a violent turn.
It did very well. And I guess we're also saying, though, is we don't know, though, when that exactly happened. Is there any way to prove that happened right before he died, or did that happen a day before?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if, they were probably, medically, at the time, there was a way to be able to determine that, but we don't know if it was.
Yeah. And I know he didn't really have a clear plan in his mind, but years later in an interview, his mother would say, well, he really wanted to go to the Summer Olympics in Atlanta. That's probably where he was going, but she didn't tell the police that at the time. But, he wasn't too far away from Atlanta, but I don't know whether that was in his head. But he just kept telling people he had to get into the States.
Yeah, I saw he attempted many times to get into the United States. He really, really, really wanted to get out of Canada. And obviously eventually did that, but I don't know where this Olympics idea, just because he talked about it, I don't know. I think that might just be rationalization by his family, as families often do.
Yeah, I understand. And it's got to be tough for the family because, they knew something was wrong, but I'm sure they never anticipated him leaving and not coming back.
Right. I think we also have to realize that my perception of the world is that bad things are much more likely to happen to insane people or crazy people than it is to sane people. Because, of course, people who do not see reality for what it is tend to put themselves into positions where people act out against them. Yeah,
and they don't see the danger,
Yeah, so is it totally, lack of a better term, crazy that he might have gotten into a fight with somebody? No, because who knows what he was doing there. And it very well could be that he might have just run into a perfectly, normal person, and Blair was harassing that person, and the person struck back, and there was a fight. And then this person, probably a guy or a group of guys, are like, man, we don't want to do this. Let's get out of here. might not have even known how bad Blair's injuries were.
Yes, and I thought about that too, because they said that Blair had one long hair in his hand, but I thought that could have gotten there a lot of ways. Someone could have, knelt down to see him or something. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the attacker that the long hair belonged to. But yeah, you make a good point, because if this attack happened overnight, they probably didn't know that Blair had all this money on him. They probably just wanted to hurry up and get away.
Right. They wouldn't have known that he was from Canada. They wouldn't have known of everything that had happened up to that point, him going here and going to this, the rental car issue and the hotel issue and what he was telling people and quitting his job. This person that he would have encountered there would not have known any of that. The person would have just simply been like, oh, this guy is following me. This guy is attacking me. I have to do something and get out of here.
Yeah, that's true.
And really, I'm inclined to believe that then this person would be the victim, just got out of there, and then maybe saw in the news, oh, this was this guy from Canada, and the person just went on with his life or their lives or something, and knowing that, hey, I mean to hurt this guy, but he attacked me first. You would hope that those people would come forward and identify themselves, but I don't. Maybe that's just too much. You'd have to be really, really Dudley Do-Right to do that.
Yeah. Plus, the very last time Blair is seen, he was definitely acting erratically. He checked into that hotel. He got a room, but he never entered the room. But he's constantly entering the lobby and leaving. He's just, I don't know what's in his mind. You can't help but feel so bad for Blair and what he was going through in his mind. The fear that he probably had the last few days, thinking someone was trying to kill him.
For sure. I don't know. I don't know if medication would have helped him, or and this, like I said, like I just brought up, this long article that I read about how we've treated people with mental illness who commit crimes, and the whole article was based on a guy who killed multiple people, and then he was found to be paranoid, schizophrenic, and all these things. And the question is, what exactly are we supposed to do with these people? They don't necessarily know what they're doing, so they're not necessarily bad, but on the other hand, they're dangerous. Yeah. And this is kind of the situation Blair was in. I don't think he was a bad person. I think Blair was dangerous.
Yeah.
And what then are we supposed to do with a Blair type of person who probably not very capable of maybe keeping up on his medication, if that would have ever helped him? They like I said, in Western civilization, they've been trying to answer this question for 2,500 years, and I still don't think we have a good answer.
Yeah, because you want to be compassionate to them, but you also want to protect the public if they are dangerous.
Right. That's right. Right. We used to have sanitariums and everything here in the United States, but eventually they were determined to be against people's rights, and the public found out about all the experimentation and everything that was going on in there, no different than what the Nazis were doing to the Jews, and so we shut all that down. And since like the 60s, we tried to manage it, deinstitutionalized people like Blair, and I'm not so sure that's worked either.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ed, for chatting with us. Now, the next case, we've got a lot to dig into, so we'll talk to you again in just a few minutes about the next case.
All right, let's do it.
So that concludes my podcast on Blair Adams. I want to thank my friend Ed Dentzel from the Unfound podcast for helping to analyze this case. Stay tuned for part 2 next week, where Ed and I will discuss another disturbing death. You can find my podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. All of my original articles and links to my most recent podcasts can be found at my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I also have accounts on Facebook, X, and Instagram under that name. I have a Lost and Found podcast Patreon account where I also post articles and podcasts of lesser known missing person cases. You can reach me at Lost and Found Podcast at Yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.